What if death isn't the definitive end we've always been told it is? For millennia, the afterlife has been a matter of faith, not fact. But now, a provocative whisper is turning into a scientific debate. Are some scientists actually starting to believe the afterlife is real? We're delving into groundbreaking research on near-death experiences where individuals report vivid consciousness even when clinically dead, challenging the core belief that mind dies with brain. Are these just tricks of a dying brain, or could they be whispers from beyond? Join us as we uncover the studies, the scientists, and the startling evidence that's forcing us to ask, what really happens when we die? The question of what, if anything, transpires after the cessation of physical life has captivated human thought for millennia. This purported existence, in which the essential part of an individual's stream of consciousness or identity continues to exist after the death of their physical body, forms the core of what is commonly termed the afterlife. Concepts of post-mortem existence are deeply woven into the fabric of diverse cultures and religious traditions, addressing fundamental existential anxieties and aspirations concerning mortality and the nature of consciousness itself. Beyond religious dogma, the afterlife has also served as a fertile ground for literary and philosophical exploration, a location for speculation and conjecture, where hypothetical and counterfactual scenarios allow for the examination of temporality and narrative. This imaginative engagement with the afterlife, often deliberately abandoning mimetic commitment to reality, highlights the multifaceted nature of the concept, extending its reach beyond purely empirical or theological domains. The provocative claim, the afterlife is real. Scientists are starting to believe. In recent times, a compelling and often sensationalized narrative has emerged, suggesting a significant shift within the scientific community. The assertion that the afterlife is real. Scientists are starting to believe. This claim, frequently amplified by media headlines such as leading U.S. scientist who studied millions of near-death experience, says there's proof of the afterlife, or statements from individual researchers like, the evidence we have is that when a person dies, that part that makes us who we are, the soul or mind, or whatever you call it, it does not become annihilated. Implies a burgeoning acceptance of post-mortem consciousness among those traditionally seen as arbiters of empirical reality. Such pronouncements demand careful, evidence-based scrutiny, particularly the implication that a consensus is forming or that mainstream scientific thought is undergoing a fundamental reorientation. One of the critical distinctions necessary for a nuanced understanding is that the very framing of the scientists' claim often conflates the speculative interpretations or personal convictions of individual researchers with established consensus-based scientific theory. The journey from preliminary findings or anomalous data to a widely accepted scientific paradigm is long and arduous, requiring extensive replication, rigorous testing, and the development of robust theoretical frameworks. Headlines and popular accounts may highlight outlier viewpoints or the bold interpretations of pioneering researchers without fully contextualizing these within the broader often more skeptical scientific landscape. Therefore, a central task of this report is to deconstruct this potential conflation and assess whether there is evidence of a genuine paradigm shift or if it is more accurately characterized as the exploration of specific, sometimes controversial, research avenues. Furthermore, the term afterlife itself is not a scientifically operationalized concept. This inherent ambiguity leads to considerable confusion when discussing scientific belief in it. Religious and cultural traditions offer rich and varied depictions of post-mortem existence, from spiritual realms to reincarnation. Scientific investigations, however, rarely, if ever, directly test for heaven or rebirth in these traditional senses. Instead, they might explore the persistence of consciousness or awareness under extreme physiological conditions, which, while a necessary component for many afterlife beliefs, is not sufficient to confirm them. The claim that scientists believe in the afterlife can thus be profoundly misleading if the afterlife, under scientific consideration, is a narrowly defined persistence of consciousness, while the public interprets the term through the lens of more expansive religious or cultural narratives. This semantic divergence can lead to significant misinterpretations of scientific findings, a tapestry of beliefs, cultural and religious perspectives on the afterlife. The concept of an afterlife is extraordinarily diverse, reflecting a wide spectrum of human, cultural, and religious imagination. Many traditions posit the existence of spiritual realms, such as heaven, hell, Valhalla, Jannah, the Summerland, or Pure Lands, where an individual's consciousness or soul is believed to reside after physical death. Another prominent concept, particularly central to Indian religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, as well as being found in various ancient Greek philosophies, e.g., Pythagoras, Plato, and numerous tribal and modern spiritual movements, is that of reincarnation or rebirth. This involves the cyclical existence of an aspect of a living being, which starts a new life in a different physical body or form after each death, often with one's status in the subsequent life or afterlife realm determined by actions and conduct in the preceding life. Beyond these specific doctrines, the afterlife has also functioned as a powerful literary and philosophical motif. Literature concerning life after death provides a space for imagining counterfactuals, exploring the nature of time and narrative, and reflecting on fundamental aspects of literary theory itself. As one analysis notes, writing about the afterlife often presents an imaginary as imaginary, deliberately abandoning any commitment to mimetic representation of reality. This imaginative freedom contrasts sharply with the methodological constraints and empirical aims of scientific investigation. The afterlife in scientific discourse, a matter of definition and scope. When scientific inquiry approaches phenomena potentially related to an afterlife, its scope and definitions differ significantly from theological or purely philosophical explorations. Science primarily investigates the nature of consciousness, its relationship to brain function, and its potential persistence under extreme conditions, such as clinical death, rather than testing specific doctrines about spiritual realms or reincarnation. The challenge lies in defining terms like soul or consciousness in ways that are measurable and empirically testable. As one scientist candidly puts it, yes, as a scientist, there are many ways to prove the soul exists. It simply depends on what you define as the soul. This highlights the crucial role of operational definitions in scientific discourse. Research into how science-oriented individuals themselves conceptualize post-mortem existence reveals a spectrum of views. A study examining such perspectives categorized various forms of continuity, including social continuity, being remembered through one's work or impact on others, continuity through offspring, or the persistence of mind, consciousness, or soul. Many of these forms of continuity, particularly social ones, do not align with traditional understandings of a personal afterlife involving continued subjective experience. The scientific investigation into phenomena like near-death experiences, NDEs, is often framed as a study of anomalous experiences or an exploration of the boundaries of consciousness rather than a direct quest to validate pre-existing religious or cultural afterlife narratives. Researchers in this field, such as Dr. Sam Parnia or Dr. Bruce Grayson, typically employ terms like consciousness, awareness, or recalled experiences of death in their published work. While these researchers may explore the implications of their findings for the potential survival of consciousness, their primary research questions are generally formulated within the existing, albeit potentially expanding, scientific paradigm. The inferential leap from evidence of consciousness during clinical death to proof of the afterlife is frequently made in popular discourse or by individuals with pre-existing beliefs rather than being a direct claim from the core scientific findings themselves. Indeed, the very act of scientifically investigating phenomena related to the afterlife compels a re-evaluation of fundamental concepts such as life, death, and consciousness. This re-evaluation, spurred by advancements in medicine and scientific methodology, is arguably a more significant and immediate outcome of such research than any definitive proof of an afterlife. For instance, Dr. Sam Parnia's work in resuscitation science has reframed death not as an instantaneous event, but as a process that unfolds over time. Similarly, research into NDEs, where individuals report vivid experiences during periods of clinical death, forces a deeper examination of the relationship between measurable brain activity and subjective awareness. Theoretical frameworks like quantum consciousness further attempt to redefine consciousness itself, sometimes positing it as a fundamental aspect of the universe. Thus, the scientific inquiry, irrespective of its ultimate conclusions regarding the afterlife, inherently pushes the boundaries of our understanding of these core concepts. The narrative that scientists are starting to believe might be more accurately interpreted as scientists are grappling with new data and theoretical possibilities that challenge long-held definitions and assumptions. The mainstream neuroscience view, consciousness as a brain-based phenomenon. The dominant paradigm within contemporary neuroscience posits that consciousness, our subjective awareness of ourselves and the world, is an emergent property arising from the complex electrochemical activity of the brain. From this perspective, mental states, thoughts, perceptions, and emotions are correlates of and dependent upon neural processes. Mainstream scientific thinking, therefore, generally discounts the possibility that consciousness could survive physical death in any meaningful way. The assertion is that since consciousness is a byproduct of brain function, the cessation of brain activity, particularly brain death, necessarily entails the end of consciousness. Brain death is medically and legally defined as the complete and irreversible loss of all brain function, including the brainstem, which signifies an unresponsive coma, absence of brainstem reflexes, and the inability to breathe independently. This state is considered the point at which consciousness, as understood by conventional neuroscience, is extinguished. The strong link between consciousness and brain activity is supported by extensive evidence showing how physical or chemical alterations to the brain, through injury, disease, anesthesia, or psychoactive drugs, can profoundly modify, diminish, or abolish conscious experience. As one review notes, the view in neuroscience is that consciousness, as we know it, is entirely generated by the brain and does not exist separately from or independent of the brain. Similarly, our review discussing philosophical positions on the mind-brain relationship indicates that most scientists and philosophers consider themselves to be material monists, a view that sees phenomenal experience as an emergent property of brain activity. Death as a process, Dr. Sam Parnia's contributions. Challenging the traditional view of death as a singular, irreversible moment, Dr. Sam Parnia, a critical care physician and director of resuscitation research, has presented compelling arguments and research suggesting that death is in fact a process that unfolds over a period of time, even after cardiac arrest, the cessation of heartbeat and breathing. His work highlights that the cells of the body, including brain cells, do not die instantaneously. Instead, they begin their own individual death processes after somatic death, and this cellular demise can take hours, or potentially even longer, before irreversible damage occurs. Parnia states, "You have hours, if not days, before the brain and other organs in the body are irreversibly damaged after death." This extended window offers possibilities for resuscitation and also raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness during this perimortem period. Dr. Parnia's research into experiences of death, his preferred terminology for NDEs, in cardiac arrest survivors, indicates that some individuals report lucid, well-structured thought processes, memory formation, and awareness, even when their brains are presumed to be highly dysfunctional or non-functional from a conventional standpoint. These paradoxical accounts lead Parnia and colleagues to question whether consciousness is solely produced by the brain. He speculates that the brain might act more as an intermediary or a filter for a consciousness that is not entirely confined to it, or that consciousness might be an as of yet undiscovered scientific entity. the tension between the mainstream neuroscientific view that consciousness ceases with the loss of integrated brain function and Parnia's research findings, which suggest that death is a more protracted process during which consciousness might persist or be experienced, forms a key area of current scientific debate. Parnia's work does not necessarily prove the existence of an afterlife in a traditional spiritual sense, but it fundamentally challenges conventional understandings of the timing and nature of death, as well as the precise relationship between brain activity and conscious awareness at the brink of mortality. If consciousness can indeed be experienced when the brain is not functioning in a manner typically associated with it, this opens a conceptual door, though it does not define what, if anything, lies beyond that door. The implication is not necessarily a soul departing to a spiritual realm, but rather that our understanding of consciousness's dependence on continuous, complex brain function might be incomplete, particularly in the extreme physiological state accompanying dying. The hard problem of consciousness, underpinning much of the debate about consciousness and its potential survival, is what philosopher David Chalmers termed the hard problem of consciousness. This refers to the question of why and how physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective, qualitative experience, the what it's like aspect of being qualia. While neuroscience has made significant strides in identifying the neural correlates of consciousness, the NCCs, patterns of brain activity associated with particular conscious states, it has yet to provide a complete explanation for how these physical processes generate subjective awareness itself. This philosophical challenge highlights the current limitations of a purely materialistic neuroscience in fully accounting for consciousness. Near-death experiences, NDEs, stand at the forefront of discussions concerning the possibility of an afterlife, offering some of the most compelling, albeit controversial, anecdotal and researched phenomena. These are profound subjective episodes reported by individuals who have been on the brink of death or even clinically dead and subsequently revived. Dr. Bruce Greyson. A psychiatrist, Dr. Bruce Greyson is a pioneering figure in NDE research. He co-founded the International Association for Near-Death Studies, IANS, and developed the NDE scale, a standardized psychometric instrument used to quantify the depth and features of NDEs. Over his career, Dr. Greyson has investigated more than 1,000 NDE cases, meticulously documenting their phenomenology and the profound, often transformative after effects on individuals' attitudes, beliefs, values, and personalities. He argues that NDEs cannot be readily dismissed as mere dreams, hallucinations, or products of psychopathology, given their clarity, complex structure, and occurrence under conditions of severe physiological compromise, such as trauma, cessation of brain activity, deep general anesthesia, or cardiac arrest, where conscious awareness and sensory experiences should, according to conventional neuroscience, be minimal or absent. His research challenges traditional models of the mind-brain relationship and explicitly considers the possibility that consciousness may survive physical death. Dr. Sam Parnia's research focuses on consciousness during cardiac arrest and the physiological processes of dying. He has been the principal investigator for the awareness during resuscitation studies, which represent some of the largest and most systematic investigations into NDEs in cardiac arrest survivors. AWARE-1 study, results published 2014. This multi-center prospective study aimed to examine the incidence and nature of awareness during cardiac arrest and, notably, to test the validity of out-of-body claims through the use of hidden visual targets, images placed in locations only visible from an out-of-body perspective. Among 2,060 cardiac arrest events, 140 survivors were eligible for interviews, and 101 completed them. Of these, 9% reported experiences consistent with NDEs, and 2% described awareness with explicit recall of seeing and hearing actual events related to their resuscitation. One particularly detailed case involved a patient who reported a verifiable period of conscious awareness that occurred minutes after the heart had stopped, at a time when significant cerebral function was not expected. The persistent contradiction between the subjective richness and reported lucidity of NDEs and the expected state of severe brain impairment or non-function during events like cardiac arrest is a central puzzle. The research trend, exemplified by Parnia's AWARE studies, is an attempt to bridge this explanatory gap by employing more sophisticated physiological monitoring techniques, such as EEG and cerebral oximetry. The AWARE-2 finding of normal EEG activity consistent with consciousness emerging late into CPR represents an effort to identify a potential neural correlate for these reported experiences. If consciousness during cardiac arrest is indeed linked to these late emerging EEG signals, it might reduce the paradox, but it simultaneously introduces a new question. Why and how does this specific brain activity emerge under such extreme conditions and after such a prolonged period of apparent quiescence? Ultimately, the question of an afterlife touches upon the limits of scientific inquiry. While science can illuminate the processes of life and death and explore the nature of consciousness as it relates to the physical brain, the ultimate questions about what may or may not lie beyond the threshold of death may remain in the realm of personal belief, philosophical contemplation, and faith. The most significant shift occurring among scientists may not be towards a collective belief in the afterlife, but rather towards a deeper acknowledgement of the profound mystery of consciousness itself and the current limitations of purely reductionist approaches to fully explain its nature and capabilities. This intellectual openness and humility in the face of the unknown is a hallmark of scientific progress, even if it does not provide the definitive answers to humanity's oldest questions that many seek.